Thank you for joining us for this discussion about developing and writing a college essay. My name is Joe Carr, and I'm joined today by two certified experts on this subject. Christine Brown is the Senior Associate Dean of Admission here at Providence College, and Roy Peter Clark, a legendary friar from the class of 1970, America's writing coach, joins us from Florida. It's great to have you both with us here today. This is a really important and interesting subject. And Roy, I'd like to start with you for just a moment. Your 21st book is about exactly this subject with, in fact, the title is Writing Tools for the College Admission Essay. Have a look at it here. Write Your Way into the School of Your Dreams. With 20 books already in print, what was it that made you decide to tackle this subject?
There was I remember an interview with Barbara Walters, was talking to a famous composer, song composer, and asked the composer, what comes first, the lyrics or the melody? And he said to her, what comes first is the phone call. And so having over my shoulder, I don't know if it's visible, I decided these are the 8 books that I've published in the last 2 decades with Little Brown, the publisher. And about, I don't know, I guess maybe about 15 years ago, here in St. Petersburg, Florida, I'd worked with many, many young writers, including elementary school. My first book was about teaching elementary school students to write. And so I was very used to teaching young people to write about their own experiences. And then it occurred to me that, this was that most young people, young writers, most young students have one very important essay to write before they turn age of 18. And that is the college admissions essay. And the way those essays are prompted and organized, they tend to be what I would call sort of personal essays. And I'm a contributing writer to the Tampa Bay Times newspaper. And I write personal essays here in my 70s for baby boomers and others. And it's a powerful genre. And in high school, you'd think, given the value of the importance of that, the high stakes of that essay for many students, there'd be more instruction about it. And so when my publisher, Little Brown, who also published Emily Dickinson, if I may say so, asked me, would I like to do this? And I said, not only would I like to do this, but I've been volunteering to coach students here in St. Petersburg and helping them along with their college essay. So let's get going.
Christine, you saw you nodding along with a lot of what Roy was saying there. You have vast experience in this area in addition to your work in college admission. You were a counselor for high school students for many years. Why do you assign such a high value to the essay?
Yeah, and I think assigning the high value is the thing that gets students so anxious about it. But for us, it is our opportunity to have a conversation with the student. We get over 13,000 applications here at PC in the course of the year, and this is where we're able to really get to know them beyond the courses that they took and the grades that they've earned, and beyond even their activities resume, the things that they're doing outside of the classroom. This is where we really get to learn who they are and what they might contribute to our community.
So let's get into the book and some practical advice, Roy. What are the most important characteristics of a college essay that really works?
So I have a short list, which I think it'll be easy for me to read, which is kind of like a self-evaluation of whether or not the essay is working. And I call this a grading rubric, but I don't mean actually that someone will grade your article. It's just like here are the things that matter, and I'll just read them very quickly. To adhere to the prompt, which is very important, but to make creative use of the prompt, to reveal a distinctive voice, the sound of actually that's the sound of somebody talking, to have a sharp focus. These essays tend to be very short, and so it should be about some one thing about you or your character. If you can, to tell a compelling story, and there are several of these in the examples in my book, to include interesting details, to show an interest in words, to make sure the piece has even if it's short, has a beginning, middle, and end, to offer evidence of your academic interest. One of my editor's sons recently graduated from Brown, and he wrote his essay about how when he was in ninth grade, he and another student would have these debates as to whether zero was actually a number or not. Well, yeah, he wanted to be a mathematics major, and that's a perfect evidence of his academic interest. You have to inspect and correct it. An admissions officer says told me from Eckerd College here in St. Petersburg, that some students misspell the name of the college, and that's not helpful. And then I also think that many of the 25 essays in my book have what I would call the it factor. You know, something has a sort of a spirit, a liveliness, not just a checking the box adherence to the prompt. And maybe one final thing. So journalists know, and I've worked with journalists now for most of my career, they have something called the lead, which means what comes first in the story. And it's very important in journalism that something at the beginning of a story or an article is either interesting or important or both. But I think it's really important in a college essay to grab the busy admissions officers kind of by the collar so that they can't resist reading more into the story. I have a next door neighbor named Charlie Daly, a wonderful young woman. I did not coach her on her essay, but we talked about her essay afterwards. And we talked about what would have happened if she had begun her essay, quote, I was born on Valentine's Day with 11 toes, which is a truth. It's a fact that she was polydactyl. I didn't know that word. I thought she was telling me that she was a pterodactyl. But she began her essay talking about Ernest Hemingway and how he brought polydactyl cats to Key West, Florida. So it's a wonderful essay. But yeah, you don't want to back into this essay. You want, if it's 300 words, if it's 500 words, really, you want to start off. You want to start off with a bang.
Christine, what's your reaction to that rubric? Let's call it that.
Yeah.
Does that sound like a structure that you would enjoy reading? You've read, I'm sure, thousands of these by now.
Sure. Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I think, students that have that it factor, that have that energy about their essay, and you can tell that they've taken the time and put the pride into their work. It grabs you by by the neck, so to speak. And I think it really does make us want to read more. It makes us want to get through and read to the end, kind of, oh, I want to see how the story ends, rather than something that wades into a subject and, takes a long time to get to the point of the story.
Maybe sometimes they're so good you like to slow down and savor them a little
Yeah,
bit, right? Instead
sure.
of just try to get through them, right? That makes good
Absolutely.
sense.
Yep.
Roy, you referenced an affection for words or an interest in words. I don't remember exactly how you characterized that, but that was an interesting thought that you described a moment ago. How does a person develop that?
Well, one of the things that my book attempts to do is to use the doorway of the college admissions essay to encourage the reader or the student, to persuade the student that they are not only fulfilling an important task, but they're entering, let's call it a club. They are gaining entrance into a group of people who think of themselves as readers and writers, who begin to think of themselves as among the most literate people in their communities, in their schools, in their communities. Um, we kind of, I think, I guess when I was in high school and in Providence, I got I embody the great educations that I received. But that said, that I look back and I realized that we expected everybody in the society, we hope, that they are readers. Reading is a sort of a social skill necessary for so many kind of tasks and roles in the society. But we don't think about that way about writing. We kind of sometimes think of writing as somehow like a fine art, so that there's 20 students in the room and someone comes up to one of them and says, you could be a writer. And when someone said that to me, I was honored. But now I look back and said, what about my classmates? Why couldn't they be writers? And so, to the most literate people in any society have three behaviors that they practice. The first is the way they read. The second is their ability to write different ways. And the third, something I learned at Providence profoundly from the English faculty, that literate people have the ability to talk about how meaning is created through language, through reading and writing. So I don't want the literacy club to be very narrow. I want it to be as wide as possible. And I want this experience of telling this story that only you can tell to be the baptism, if you will, into an assuming an identity as a reader, as a writer, as a literate person.
Christine, what do you say to a student who is stuck coming up with a subject or might just feel that they don't have anything interesting to say? Is there a technique for getting started?
Yeah, there are so many different ways to start the brainstorming process. And I think the way that I would start with students is to just take the pressure off and say, it doesn't need to be something big, it needs to be something meaningful. And so I ask them to think about the times where they're at their happiest, or the time where they felt like they learned a lot or something was surprising to them. And it might be a very mundane subject. It could be making meatballs with their grandmother on Sunday in the kitchen. It could be learning calculus. But the way that they write about it doesn't have to be mundane at all. I think it's all about taking the pressure off, needing to come up with something big and really hone in on things that are important to them.
And then getting started, the lead that Roy talked about, and structure. Roy, can we go back to the idea of structure for just a second, and developing the good lead? There is a way to write an essay that we have all been taught. Is there any value in trying to tweak that a little bit, try something a little bit different, or would you encourage any student writing an essay to follow the established pattern?
One of the things that has impressed me and helped me in my own teaching is um, how good and useful the prompts are. And some of these prompts come from, I guess, the process through a kind of a common application. And some of the prompts come from individual schools. And I think they fall into certain categories. The biggest one, I think, the most common one is probably something about overcoming some obstacle that you have run into in your in your young life. And when you read these essays in my book, the definition of what constitutes an obstacle ranges from getting members of your high school class to join your bug club, since you're a budding scientist, yeah, to the murder of a parent. And but it's a sort of it's a standard literary form. Uh, anything we watch on Netflix, the things we watch on situation comedies, the things we read in comic books, we all understand what that is. So it's certainly, it's the kind of standard and helpful. I don't remember the essay that that I wrote to get into Providence, but I do remember an essay. So the school in 69, 70 nominated me for a Rhodes Scholarship, and I was one of two winners from. I didn't win a scholarship, but finalists from the state of Rhode Island, and I remember exactly what I wrote, almost to the word. I said, I grew up in a Catholic family with a Protestant father and a Jewish grandmother. Religious tolerance was very important in our family, especially around the holidays. And when I went to a social event, one of the judges came up to me and said, "Oh, you're the young man who comes from that very interesting, diverse religious family." Yeah. When I read that, he was telling me about how into that essay he was. So that falls into a lovely prompt that I like to give students at many different levels, from very young to professionals. I didn't make it up, but I learned it from reading, and I've used it time and time again. And the prompt goes like this. It's described in the book. The thing about me is, okay, the thing about me is. So I'll give you a couple. The thing about me is, I grew up with three brothers, but the thing about me is I grew up with three brothers, and but now I live my life with three daughters. The thing about me is I'm 77 years old and I still play in a rock band. Uh, every time I there's one in the book. The thing about me is I'm addicted to this game called the Crane. If I have a $5 bill and I go into a crane, that thing that goes down and picks up all of the little stuffed animals. And look, uh, the people faced obstacles and define themselves in all different kinds of ways. Another prompt that I like is tell me a story about an object that you own or you know about that has a story hiding inside of it. Okay, over my shoulder, you can barely see it maybe on top of this old piano. There's a picture of a brown pelican, an artistic picture. There's several of them. Well, I went to city council in St. Petersburg, Florida, and persuaded the city council to name the brown pelican as the official bird of the city of St. Petersburg. Now, you wouldn't know that just by looking at the various pictures I have of pelicans on my wall. But, there are, I used to wear my grandmother's wedding ring. My Jewish grandmother gave me one of her wedding rings to wear. And she was only married once, but she had lots of jewelry. And so I wound up writing almost a book-length narrative called Sadie's Ring. I don't wear it anymore because I gave it to my daughter when she married. It's a little object. No one would know that seeing it, but you can sort of tell it. We all have those sacred objects that reveal so much about who we are. This is what I want to say is that when you go for a job interview, you you want to dress probably, I'm sure, a little better than you normally do. I mean, you show a little better vision of yourself. And I say, as a writer, when I write something, I want it to sound like me, but just a little bit better, a little cleaner, a little more direct, and more revealing of my virtues and my character.
That makes me think about something else related to process and structure, Roy, and that is the review, editing, drafting process. I read an interview where you talked about draft zero. Could you explain your thought process with respect to how to get to the end line, the finished product?
There are two almost universal problems that I think all writers have to solve. The first is procrastination. I'm sure many students know that they need to write this essay, but for a variety of reasons, they wait and wait and wait and wait until the deadline. It's the same as journalism in a way. The deadline is the adrenaline that fuels them. Okay. And the second is writer's block. They sit down with a computer or with a notebook and they want to write, but nothing is there. So, yeah, these are um, these are problems that have antidotes. And so the antidote to procrastination which is a negative force, a negative word, is rehearsal. So I was very proud to deliver the commencement address at Providence College for its 99th, at the end of its centennial year. It's an amazing, amazing honor.
2017.
And I was invited to give that address by Father Shanley in February for an event in May. I did not have my hands on the keyboard to draft that speech for more than 2 months, but I would argue that I was, quote, writing that story in my head, in my memory, in my mind, in my sense of humor, in my vision of myself. So I'm in the middle of the night looking up at the ceiling. I'm putting the dishes away. If I were mowing the lawn, all those things. And so all of us know how to rehearse. We just don't ask somebody to get married. We don't do a marriage proposal. We think these things through in our mind. When I sat down to actually write the very first draft, it was 8,000 words long. All that stuff kind of came out, and then was the other task of revision, which would get me from 8,000 words to 1,800 words for a 15-minute speech, whatever it happened to be. So, so students who are maybe hearing this at some point, yeah, you can be thinking about it and talking to people about it before you actually write what I'm going to describe as the zero draft, not the first draft. The problem with um, writer's block comes from beginning the story with your standards too high. And I'm guilty of telling students, like, this essay is important. Oh my God, it's important, it's important, it's important. But nobody needs to see the first 500 words that you put on paper that you scribble out. It's not even good enough, or it's not even to the standard of a first draft. It's a zero draft. It means sitting down and let your hands do the thinking, writing as quickly as you can for 10 or 15 minutes. Not even writing full sentences, maybe making a list of things. And if you do that early enough, if you do that late, it's going to be tough to get to where you want to go. But if you begin that process early enough, you can, through revision, make it better and better and better.
Well, it was certainly a memorable commencement address, and for prospective Providence College students and their families, you might take a look at it on YouTube. It's insightful, it's entertaining, and it ends with a performance of Twist and Shout on a keyboard on the stage in front of the podium. So it was one that those of us who were there will never forget at Commencement 2017, a day, by the way, at which Providence College also awarded Roy an honorary doctorate. Well deserved, of course. It was a great day in PC's history, wrapping up the centennial year here at Providence College. Christine, what do you most hope to learn from a student essay? What are the kinds of things you're looking for? Is a personal reflection important to that? Or tell us what you think when you start.
Absolutely. I think the thing that I most hope to learn is how a student views themselves, what they view as important about their who they are right now. I think that personal reflection piece is really important, and it's often something that students can leave out. I agree with Roy that the prompts are great. But sometimes students focus on the first half of the question and not the and why, or the end of the prompt that really drives that personal reflection. And I think that those essays that wind up in front of us without that personal reflection can often fall flat. So it is really, I think for us, understanding if the student truly has an understanding of who they are, and again, who they are right now, but also what they might bring forward into their future.
Roy, what are some of the common traps that the writers fall into, I guess, in general, but specifically when it comes to college essays? I'm thinking about things like cliches, forced conclusions, things like that, and how are they best avoided?
My tendency is to hold off on that the process of sort of thinking about what I don't want to do or what I got to remember to avoid. And there's a nice distinction that I learned pretty late in my writing life, still learning it. And so there are writers, professional writers, who are putter-inners, and there are others who are taker-outers. Okay. Now, the ones who are taker-outers are kind of like building the making decisions on like sentence by sentence, word by word, on what to include and how this sentence should be shaped and things like that. I am not that kind of writer. Although I know them, I know some of them, and yeah, so they're prize winners, and so they come in both kinds. But when I'm beginning a story, when I'm thinking about these things, if I'm thinking about it, I put it in. I don't care if I don't have the spelling correct yet. I don't care if it's a cliche, because if it's the first thing I'm thinking about. Now, the great thing about being a putter inner is that you can, yeah, you have to be a taker outer later in the process. Okay? It's like you need that clay at the beginning, Michelangelo, before you get down to the glories of the Pietà. A cla I have over my shoulder. I've never done this before, but I put on my ancient piano the 8 books, the last 8 books I've written for Little Brown. And this is, I'll pick this one off the shelf. This one has my favorite title. It's called The Glamour of Grammar. I don't know if you can kind of see it. But I missed a deadline and had to get an extended deadline on this book. And what happened was I said, okay, I'm being too careful. This is a grammar book. I'm being too careful. Let's just write it. And so I handed in 100 chapters, 150,000 words. Okay. Made my second draft, very proud of myself. And then the editor called me and said, you know, Roy, the contract calls for 50 chapters and 75,000 words. So my next job was taking 50 chapters out. But listen, it wasn't hard because I'd done the work of putting in what it is that that I wanted to say. Now, I do think that when I write a book, when I wrote that grammar book or any of these books behind me, I had a team of people helping me improve sentences, in helping me correct little grammatical and syntactical errors. I had people helping me realize that I made a factual error um, in a chapter or an essay. So listen, I don't want parents to write, I don't want parents to write their kids' essays. Um, I don't want a student to feel like they need to hire an expensive writing coach. Uh, I do, I do all my coaching of students, pro bono, free of charge. Um, but the key thing is that everybody needs everybody needs the help of some people who know a little bit more than you about the language or about grammar or about repetition or those kinds of things, and who can identify those things. I'd rather have, at this point in time, that be a human being. It could be a teacher, it could be a counselor, could be a well-minded parent. It could be an older student, as I often relied upon when I was at Providence College. I know that artificial intelligence is now, we're on the cusp of that revolution. But because of that, I think it's particularly important for both honesty and also uh, the future of literacy to keep human beings, to have a community of folks who are helping us.
Roy, as we approach the end of this discussion, let's talk about the end of the essay. Does the story need a moral, and how should an essay conclude?
Well, the essay will conclude.
Indeed. Period.
But with a period and white space. So, but I really like the tradition of I like the tradition in journalism of a word which has an obscure origin, and it's called the kicker. So the kicker in journalism is the clever ending, sometimes overwritten, but it's an attempt to reward the reader. If you think of any work of 500, 800 words, there are gold coins that are little rewards for the reader. It might be a good lead. It might be a wonderful quotation, a little anecdote. And yeah, you want to save one of those for the end. Maybe my favorite one, if I have to say so, is the first one in the book. We don't have time to read the essay, but it's by I didn't help. Sam French is the name of the writer. Sam is a director, a theater director in the New York area. He didn't get into Yale with this essay. He was like salutatorian at an art school, but he got into an exclusive program at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh for theater. And he talks about being in the Galapagos Islands on a student trip. And while he's there, he and his friends go into a snorkel shop. And while they're in there, he sees a young woman who has a T-shirt, wearing a T-shirt with, I think, a movie, like a movie logo on the front of it. And he's in a kind of a romantic comedy kind of way. He's struck by whether he should, approach this young woman, and not just say hello, be friendly American. And his friend said, "Don't do it. No, no, come on, don't do it. No, you can't. You're not. Don't be. Don't be lame. Don't be a jerk." And so the ending goes. He says, "Down the street at the Charles Darwin Research Center was a tortoise named Lonesome George. George is lonesome because he's the only known Pinta Island tortoise left alive. George is lonesome because he will never be able to have a mate that he truly belongs with. I glanced at the girl, glanced at my friends, and walked toward her. This one's for you, Lonesome George." I'm sorry. I laugh every time I read it. when Lonesome George eventually died a few years later, the Tampa Bay Times published his letter, his essay, in the feature pages. So there's a kind of one of my favorite writing tools. So Shakespeare didn't write "The Queen is dead, my lord." He wrote "The Queen, my lord, is dead." And so he's showing us how important it is, how helpful it is for the writer to put the most interesting word or phrase at the end of a sentence or the end of a paragraph. All comedy is based on that principle. All great oratory is based on that principle. And when I'm writing my essays, one of the things I do is I look to see if there's something good, a word, a phrase, an image, a name of a dog, that's hiding in the middle of a sentence and paragraph. And it's easy enough for me to take "The Queen is dead." Oh, circle "is dead" and move it out to the end. Place emphatic words in a sentence or paragraph at the end. Period, full stop, drop the mic, stick the landing.
The conclusion of that Lonesome George essay reminds me that the essay itself features every single characteristic of the rubric that you described at the beginning, so it all comes together there. Christine, let's give you the last word. We're talking mostly, we hope, to prospective friars and their families. What do you have for advice and thoughts about preparing for the essay and executing it?
Yeah, I think you've heard a lot of great advice so far from Roy, and I think that rubric does really speak to the things that you want to hit. I think getting it started as early as you can and start that rehearsal process, the many draft process. I also love the idea of going to your support team, even from the very beginning, and brainstorming. What is it about me that you hope to learn from the essay? What do you gain from reading my essay? Maybe those people that I think you hold close to you or that know you really well are those people who can tell you, well, hey, what about this thing that happened? Or what about this class that you really enjoyed? Could you write about that? I think bouncing those ideas off other people, even in the beginning stages, and maybe less at the revising stages, although they're important there too. I think those can be helpful too. So, and I think last but not least, make sure that we're hearing your authentic voice. I think that's the piece that we're really looking for. We want to have that conversation with you.
Well, so much expertise and great advice from both of you. Thank you for that. The name of the book is Writing Tools for the College Admissions Essay. Write Your Way into the School of Your Dreams. It's by Roy Peter Clark, Providence College class of 1970 with an honorary degree in 2017. The Common App is open for the class of 2026, high school class of 2026, the Providence College class of, get this, Roy, 2030, 60 years after your graduation. So you'll be in the same reunion year. For more information about Providence College, visit the website and or pay us a visit here on the beautiful Providence College campus. Thank you to Christine Brown and to Roy Peter Clark for this interesting conversation, and thank you for joining us. Take care and go Friars.